Well, good evening, everybody. We'd like to welcome you tonight to our Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, June 5. And would like to make note that I believe everybody is present this evening. So that's fantastic. We start off tonight with a public hearing. This is a request by Fat Farm Partners to rezone 4.7 acres from suburban residential low-density SR1 to office plan development OPD, and to amend the general framework map of the Hendersonville Land Use and Transportation Plan to change the character area designation of the property from suburban living to suburban center. The property is located on the west side of Saundersville Road, north of Windcrest Way, as identified on Sumner County Property Tax Map 146, parcel 004.11. And that's where we're going to start tonight. We do have two people signed up for the public hearing tonight, so I asked them to come forward. We'll start off with Pamela Cogan. Pamela, if you would just introduce yourself and you can talk to us.
I am Pam Cogan, and I live at 127 Huntington Place, which is in Windcrest. And I'm here on my behalf as well as the Kleminskis, who have moved to Evansville, Indiana. She was transferred, and her house is currently up for sale and backs that piece of property. So I'm going to read the letter she sent first, okay? As owners of 110 Briarcrest Court East, we presently have our home listed for sale. We respectfully requested denial of the request to rezone the property adjacent to our home from suburban residential low density SR1 to office plan development O-PD. We have been residents of Hendersonville for over 16 years and purchased our home nearly 9 years ago. In this time, we have seen the city undergo a tremendous transformation, and with those changes have come numerous challenges. As long-time residents, it is difficult to comprehend the demand that exists for additional commercially zoned property that would supersede negative impacts to residents of the Windcrest subdivision. Presently, there are 133 listings for available commercial space in the city, with the closest being approximately half a mile from the location on Saundersville Road. Additionally, the entire stretch of Saundersville Road from Indian Lake east to the interchange with Windcrest Hills Parkway is presently zoned commercial, with infrastructure in place to support such development. With such availability of commercially zoned property in the immediate vicinity that does not impact residential and property, it is unconscionable that the zoning change and its negative impacts would be approved. Should this request be approved, it would allow uses such as offices, retail goods, establishments, daycares, financial institutions, restaurants, etc. in the location inconsistent with the character of the area that is classified as suburban living. According to the Hendersonville Land Use and Transportation Plan, we understand that Hendersonville is experiencing unprecedented growth and development, and feel strongly that these changes should be managed cautiously to ensure Hendersonville remains the city that residents will be proud of. Existing zoning for commercial development on Saundersville Road meets this need both now and in the future. If approved, this request only meets the short-term financial needs of the developer, and the impacts will be borne on the residents of Windcrest subdivision. Potential impacts include ingress and egress for the commercial buildings located in the neighborhood, and given the phased approach to the construction that is proposed, construction activities could go on for years. Additionally, nearby entrances and exit ramps from Vietnam Vet Boulevard is already overly congested and is a proven by the large number of accidents that have occurred. Lastly, negative impacts will certainly include property values, numbers that will potentially plummet should rezoning of the property be approved. Personally, we have lost 2 buyers because of the rezoning request. A home is one's most valuable asset. Please consider the impact to the more than 200 families that is in the Windcrest community. And I agree with the letter fully. I have I've been there since 1999. And when we were speaking with the developers last night, he said there could be anywhere from 102 to 150 parking spots in that area. Those are going to turn over. I'm being modest 3 to 5 times a day, depending on what kind of businesses are in there. That's an additional 450 to 750 cars in my subdivision every day while I'm trying to get out or in. And that amount of traffic on Saundersville Road and in our community is ridiculous. I would never choose to live there if that was there before I got there. And for those reasons, as well as it's going to drop our property value, the people it's going to bring, the lighting issue of the parking lot, the property, I feel horribly bad for the properties that are backing that because of the impact it's going to have on them immediately. And living in construction for however many years, because they said that they're going to build them as they sell them. So I am asking that it not be approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next would be Harold Vaughn. If you would, just introduce yourself and your address.
I'm Harold Vaughn. I live at 125 Windcrest Way. Been there since January of 2000. I don't disagree with most or almost all of what Ms. Cogan's had to say. This whole situation is kind of a catch-22 as far as I'm concerned. Someday something will be built on that property, and we don't know what we don't know when that someday is, and we don't know what the something will be. So it's like we gamble now on the proposed development, or we gamble in the future on a different proposed development. And as residents of Windcrest, we have very little control. Maybe you guys don't approve something. It doesn't necessarily stop there. It can go on. And we have 2 of 11 votes that we can impact. And the rest of them we can't impact. They can vote however they like. And we don't vote for them, so we have, other than expressing our opinion, we have no control over that. So like I said, it's a gamble on this developer or some future developer, and we don't know what would be proposed, and we don't know what would wind up being approved. This developer, from what last night's meeting, seems willing to work with us. We'll see. We don't know yet. I know one house, the property line is right down on their house. Well, he's already talked with that homeowner, and he's doing his best to, he's not going to infringe on it. He's moving it back. I don't know how far. It's still not good for that homeowner, but this developer didn't put that property line there. He also isn't the one that did not inform this new property owner where the property line was. So, again, catch-22, gamble now, gamble later is kind of the way I look at it. We've got a developer that seems like he wants to work with us. We'll see. Right now, I'm kind of on the gamble now versus later because you don't know what it'll be.
Thank you, Mr.
Excuse me, one more thing. I think if it was going to be houses, they'd already be there. That's just my personal opinion. So if residential goes there, it's probably multi-unit.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Appreciate your comments. That's all we have signed up for this public hearing, so I will declare that public hearing closed. And we move on now to, is there any commissioner or anybody that needs a request or information for assistance? Hearing none. Additions to the agenda, are there any? Hearing none. We move to the minutes of May 1st, 2018.
Move to approve.
Moved by Ms. McCormick, second by Ms. Silfwood. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And one abstention, Ms. Ashley. Okay, then we have the minutes for May 15th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Ms. McCormick, second by Mr. Robinson. Abstain, okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain, we've got, okay, Mr. Lee, abstention, Ms. Ashley, and Ms. Stringfellow. Okay. All right, yes, sir. For the third Tuesday? Yeah, okay, so Mr. Millsap abstains from the minutes of May 15th as well. All right, consent agenda items, there are none tonight. Final plats, there are none. We move now to preliminary and final development plans, and we start with the Southview Professional Plaza, which has to do with the public hearing that we just had. And who is, number one, they're agreeing to all staff comments, but who's handling this?
Grant Green, our senior planner, is
Okay.
taking the lead on this.
Mr. Green.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. This is a 4.7 acre property fronting Saundersville Road, and it's approximately 750 feet from the interchange with Vietnam Veterans Parkway. Windcrest subdivision is behind the proposed development, as you all heard in the public hearing, and this is also located across the street from Millstone, which is a mixed-use residential plan development. Land use plan requires a change in order to accommodate this request, and that would be from suburban living to suburban center. This is a SR1 zoning district, which is a single-family residential district, minimum lot size of 12,500 square feet. This would be a change to office plan development, which is, with the plan development, limits the uses from the general office zoning district. And those uses are limited to, and I think this was covered in the public hearing as well, offices, retail goods, daycare centers, financial institutions, general business services, personal service establishments, and restaurants, which it's noted that it's full service and carry out only, so there's no drive-throughs that would be associated with this. This approval allows for commercial structures that would total 30,000 square foot as shown on the plans. They're requesting as much as 40,000 square feet, depending on what's developed and what clients they find. But this initial proposal for the preliminary plan development is 30,000 square feet, four units, and currently the current SR1 zoning allows for up to 13 single-family homes. Just would require plat submittal. More than likely, it would be more in the range of 10 to 12 homes if it were developed as the current zoning allows for. So you have to accommodate for roads and other infrastructure that takes up the developable room. Also in your packets, in the following pages, it shows the site layout and the architectural renderings that they've provided. And then keep in mind, this is just the preliminary development plan, so there would be a final development plan if this were approved by the board.
Mr. Green, tell me one more time, you may have mentioned it, I just missed it, but what's the total, excuse me, got to turn my mic on. What's the total square footage that they're anticipating building in these facilities? Do you have that information?
Currently, they're showing 30,000 square feet in 4 units, but they have requested up to 40,000 square feet as a part of the PDP.
40,000 square feet for all units, or 40,000 per unit?
For all units
For all
combined.
units.
Yep.
So we're looking at, well, there's 5 there, so they're going to be less than 10,000. There's 4, so 10,000, up to
Yeah.
10,000 possibly.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so they're 10,000 square foot buildings. Okay, and SR1, just to recap, would net us probably 10 to 12 homes realistically under present zoning.
More than
Okay.
likely, that seems.
And the OPD designation for restaurants and that kind of thing, be no drive-throughs, just
Correct. Yes, it just the full service and carry out.
Full service carry out. Okay, is there anybody from the developer here? Okay. If you would, why don't you come up and introduce yourself and give you a chance to talk about your preliminary plan.
Certainly. My name is Andy Leith. I'm with Greenwood Design, representing the Fat Farm Partners. So, yes, what's being shown here on this plan is roughly 30,000 square foot, which we feel is reasonable. We are asking for 40,000 square foot, just in case maybe somebody wants an upstairs. We are trying to go after professional services. The extra uses that are included as part of the plan are just in case somebody wants to have something in there. And we did have a meeting with the community last night, in which we had a good turnout. And they had some issues with some of the uses that were listed, more particularly the restaurants and daycare centers. And so as far as the restaurant goes, we know not going to get a real good sit-down restaurant. We can't sell alcohol there. They have to be closed from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. But what we were hoping for is they market this property is if someone wanted to have a coffee shop, a sub shop, something that would complement the professional services that we hope to draw to this area. So if there's some way we can narrow that definition, we're certainly agreeable to narrow that definition if it makes the community feel better. The intent was never a full O'Charlie's or something of that nature, just something to complement the professional services while they're there during the workday. We do understand the traffic. As anybody that drives through Hendersonville knows that there's issues with traffic. Again, utilizing this as professional services, the peak traffic uses would come after the peak AM, peak PM uses of the residential areas. So yes, there's going to be some overlap, but we would hope that it wouldn't, the two peaks would not be overlapping at the same time. Some of the other things, as you said, the FMDPs will come through. The developer is willing to work with that property that is shown to the south, north of Windcrest Way, west of this development. His vegetation is clearly owned our property. He's aware of that, and our developer's aware of that, but we're willing to screen it with fencing, keep his trees in place, work with that encroachment that's there existing. So the developer for this property has been building and working in Hendersonville for well over 40 years. This is not an outside developer. He's local to the area. If this property sells, we did misspeak last night in the meeting and threw out the number 16 homes. That's been clarified to 12. We presented a layout to the community with 9 homes on it last night, where it was available for their viewing at the table. What I would like to point out is those are no architectural requirements, no size requirements. So yes, our developer's not in the mood to develop it for residential property. He would be selling it, and you would be at the mercy of someone come in and they could come straight zoning, all vinyl, 1,200 square foot homes, whatever they wanted. So the developer that I'm representing feels like this is the more responsible development for the community. And I'll answer any questions you might have that I can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee, right?
Yes,
Okay.
Leith, yes, sir.
Let me ask a couple of questions. You did mention the screening on the back side of the property. Tell me a little bit more about that. We do have other properties in town where we do have commercial or office that's in front of a residential neighborhood. What level of screening are you going to do for the whole piece there? I know it goes down there between Windcrest and Tamara.
Sure. Well, at the very minimum would be the Hendersonville requirements, which are pretty stiff as far as keeping that screen from the residential area. I do know in particular to that one lot that is north of Windcrest Way, west of this development, that the developer is willing to put up a fence whether it's required or not. And we're agreeable to working with the community on the screening if the Hendersonville standards are not enough to certainly go in there and try to make it as best we can. There have been some concerns about lighting, so we can, if someone looks out their window toward this development, they're going to see the light on. But we will work to achieve the minimum requirements on the site for Hendersonville, but we can't spill light over onto their property line. But they said if they're looking directly at it, they will see the light, but it will not be into their windows.
All right, are there any commissioners that have any questions for Mr. Lee? Mr. Robertson?
Thank you, Mr. Lee, for being here tonight, and those citizens that are concerned about or interested in this development. First of all, I have a question for Mr. Green. Was adequate public notice provided to all residents in this area?
Everything that we have in terms of public notices for the public hearing has been followed. Yes, sir.
Okay. And the developer did meet with the neighbors, Windcrest residents last night?
Yes, sir. There were probably 20 in attendance, 15 to 20, maybe more, maybe less. And there were 2 aldermen there as well.
Okay. Will the office traffic empty into Windcrest?
As you can see from the plan, yes, sir, the main entrances into this development will be from Windcrest and from Tamaris Way. The entrance on Tamaris is over 400 feet away from the next residential lot down there. The entrance off of Windcrest is relatively close to the next driveway. So that one lot would have the most impact.
Okay.
And there is a right in, right out off of Saundersville, but that's not a full access.
So, without expressing who it is, have you had some interest in this facility?
They do have one potential buyer that was in the meeting last night, and they would be purchasing the lot right off of Windcrest Way.
The whole building?
The whole entire building, yes, sir.
Okay. Just a second. Oh, I noticed on the plat there, it looks like a gazebo or some kind of facility. Can you explain what the developer has in mind there?
Well, that was added at the request of the city comments. We did say we'd like to discuss that tonight. From talking last night in the meeting, there was concern about the parking lot being used after hours.
Right.
So we feel like if we can remove that gazebo, it would sort of deter some of that from people wanting to walk up there and hang out maybe. But that was added at the request of city comments.
So the neighbors expressed a concern about that might be a place that,
They didn't particularly point out the gazebo, but they did point out the parking lot being a place of after-hours congregating.
so that's something that we could handle if it's approved in the site plan. Okay. So is it your understanding that the current zoning is not economical for you to develop into 10 to 12 homes on that
And I'll be
property?
honest with you, I'm the design engineer, so I'm not their financial advisor, and they've not discussed that particular point with me, whether or not residential is economical for them. I have some clients, their forte is residential, some is commercial. This particular client, the developer, commercial is what they do. So this is what they feel comfortable with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McCormick?
Good evening. I have a few questions as well as a comment. So just to verify, for this office, this is a zoning request for office particularly. Is it, so I know that there are certain commercial, because I've heard the word commercial said several times. I know there are certain restrictions that office provides that commercial does not. So, Mr. Freed, could you specify exactly what cannot be on the, based on if we chose to amend to office tonight, what cannot be put there?
The only thing that could be on the office, and, you know, if you hear commercial, you're thinking, oh, commercial office, that's different, and it is, but there are certain commercial type things that are allowed in the office zoning. In this particular development, with it being a planned development, only the uses that we would agree to. So there's a whole bunch of things you can do in office development. And then what happens in a planned development versus like straight zoning, if this was straight zoning, you could do whatever the allowed uses were, you know, without getting special approval. But since this is a planned development, then there's all these uses that are allowed in the regular office zone, but what the plan development does is just pick and choose which ones that it would be. It's sort of like an overlay zone on it. And in this one, there would be nothing allowed other than those things that Grant had mentioned earlier that was in the staff comments. So those things basically that were doctor's offices, offices, things like that. And the commercial sort of related thing might be a small restaurant or something like that. So that pretty much covers the things that would be allowed. So it's very limited on what those things are. And the things that the developer is proposing for those particular uses, those uses, you could add more uses to it, or it could be negotiated where we take a use or two out as well. So it can be very flexible. But
Okay.
once it's approved and all done, then that's what it is. So once that's approved, then it'd have to come all the way back through the process, or a process to change that.
Okay, thank you. Some of my other questions were basically questions or issues that were raised by the public hearing, and I'm probably going to say her name wrong, but Ms. Cogan or Cogan. Okay. A couple of things she addressed that I didn't see in my packet were the number of parking spaces that you anticipate. Is 102 or 150 the correct number?
No, 102 is what is currently shown on the plan.
Okay.
And in the meeting last night, I was asked, what's the maximum parking? That's a difficult question to answer because it's based on the use. So I did make the comment that I felt like I could draw as many as 150 spaces on this plan. That's where that number come from. If we have 150 spaces, you're probably going to have something more like a doctor's office, which is going to be less square footage but more parking intensive. If we stick to financial services, insurance agencies, they're less parking intensive, so that would take that parking number down. I really feel like around 102, 110 is about the max I can get on this site.
Okay. My next question was regarding the construction process. How long do you anticipate that these 4 buildings would take in order to construct?
So right now, they do have an interested buyer for the first lot. And if this is approved and everything goes through, we'll follow this up with a site plan as soon as they're ready to roll, which is right now according to them. So the first building will go down fairly quick within the next 12 months. The other 3, I can't answer that question. They might come through with a site plan in 2 months. They might come through one in a year and a half. But this is not like typical residential construction when you drive by one of the subdivisions and it's tore up. I mean, we'll disturb that one lot, the rest will stay grass, and it'll remain a green field until they find a buyer and build another building.
I know you have no crystal ball, but if you had to anticipate when the 4th building would be in terms of months,
Sure.
days, years, what would you estimate?
I'm going to speak on behalf of the developer here, and I know that they would probably like to be done with it within 2.5 years. That would be, if the economy stays good, they can find buyers, and they'd be done with it.
Okay. Another question that I had was, and this goes back to probably for Mr. Free, are there any other properties, and somehow when I reviewed my packet over the weekend, I saw this map, and I don't know if I've lost it or what I did, but there are, I guess the surrounding zones around that property, do we we normally have a slide or something that shows, do we have one that would show what the zoning is? I guess my concern becomes spot zoning in the, okay.
It shows that. And so the yellow,
Yeah.
the yellow areas that everybody has on their packets, that's all the SR1, which is basically single-family residential. Then you can see those other different colors. That over there is where the tan and the peach color, that's all Millstone, which is a mix of residential and some commercial over there. And then Avondale, you can see all the purple. That's the industrial heavy commercial. Then the blue back there is industrial property. So that's the area.
So for the tan and the peach, I understand that the purple is Avondale, the tan and the peach, as I remember, and this is going on my memory from Millstone, and that's been a while back, in the tan, there's no commercial property or office in that tan part, right?
I think yeah, Millstone, it's a mix.
I know
yeah.
Millstone has some, but I remember, if I remember correctly, we had some commercial kind of in the perimeter close to the Avondale side. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah, I think that's the neighborhood commercial, I think that's right there. That's the peach
The peach,
color. I
okay.
think that's what that
That's
is.
the neighborhood
But that's
commercial on the
not-
peach.
It's not planned development.
Okay.
And then the tan, that's the MXR plan development.
Okay.
And that is where you can have a mix. And most
Mm-hmm.
of it, most of Millstone is residential,
Mm-hmm.
but along that stuff along the front, that's what's going to be commercial. And there's actually, I think we approved, maybe a couple of years ago, there was some storage. I don't think they built that yet, but there's some storage kind of up in there as well, within that area,
And then
within the Millstone.
my last question, is this section that's across from it, that's part of the improved Saundersville Road part, right? Meaning, is that part of where Millstone
Yes,
has made some improvements to?
maybe Marshall might, sorry, address that exactly.
I don't think they've paved that area, but there's 2 lanes on each side.
Okay.
So there's a full, full road section. It's been there for a while, but it hasn't been paved recently.
Were there any improvements scheduled to be done to that area based on what Millstone had agreed to do? No.
Millstone, they've completed their improvements. They've
Okay.
got the pavement down, the lights are installed, curbing's in place. This, as far as I can tell, this has all the, all the improvements. And they are going to install a sidewalk and curb and gutter on their side as a part of the site plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McCormick. Any other commissioners? Mr. Lee?
Yes, there was a comment that would the developer consider upgrading and maintaining medians to the subdivision development entrances? And I'm assuming that has been agreed to, is that correct?
So yes, we even discussed that last night with the community. We're willing to maintain the sign and the median that's on Windcrest Way.
So all of the staff comments have been agreed to. And when, in the long-term road improvement plan for Saundersville, I mean, is there any additional improvement that would occur? And I think this is what perhaps Ms. McCormick was asking, but I had the same concern that if we have others in the long-term plan that are coming along, we don't want to do anything that would disrupt that. I don't mind telling you, I'm kind of betwixt and between on this. I do want to see more development. There's a big difference between a 7,500 square foot office building and a child care center in terms of the traffic that would be generated there. And I certainly want to provide places for people to work, and normally small businesses and professional offices locate in buildings like this. But I also hate to see the nature of that residential area go away as well. So I've really kind of been struggling with this.
I understand completely, and the daycare was in there because there was a plan floating around that someone had done before us that had a daycare shown on it. Our client, or my client, has people that are looking for daycares. If the daycare needs to be stricken from the uses, we're willing to do that. If it makes the community feel more comfortable about the traffic, we can take that use out. As far as the reason we chose office, we sat down with the city a few months before we submitted this. We didn't want to come ask for straight commercial because we wanted to make it more limited. And we knew with Millstone, what's across the street from us, we feel like it fits. It's a nice transition from strictly commercial to the residential area, softens it a little bit. That's why we didn't ask for straight commercial. We wanted to have a little lighter zone and can come back and ask for office. But we can take the daycare out.
Okay, thank you. So let's come back to, I don't see anybody else in the queue, so let's talk a little bit about what needs to happen here tonight. First of all, we have an offer on the table to limit additional uses if we were to enter into this agreement or the recommendation to rezone from SR1 to OPD. My question to commissioners now, are there any uses that are listed here? And let's just go over them one more time. It's on the staff report. But the proposed be limited to offices, retail goods, daycare centers, financial institutions, general business services, personal service establishments, restaurants, full service and carryout. Of course, the developer has made it very clear that these uses, if it was a restaurant, would probably coincide with the uses that are already there, noting that for a full-service restaurant, it may not be the exact place they'd want to be, but who knows? You just don't know. But are there any uses on here that any of the commissioners would like to strike if we were to enter this agreement? And I'd like to kind of get that on the table before we vote on it, yes or no, if we were to do this. Any uses that would like to be stricken?
Well, the developer has agreed to strike the use of daycare, correct?
Yes,
On
sir.
his own volition.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, daycare was my greatest
Okay.
concern, just in terms of the amount of traffic and parking that's required and
We understand.
the amount of space that's required. It's much different than a professional office.
You're right.
Okay. Just keep those in your minds. If we make this motion, however the motion goes, we can keep that in mind. If they're hearing, are there any others? Okay. All right, so what we're doing tonight is we're going to recommend to BOMA that we would rezone this property from SR1 to OPD, and the motion would then also include the approval of this preliminary master development plan. So it's two fatal things that are happening real quick here. We're going to go ahead and approve the rezone request, and we'll also approve the preliminary master development plan, understanding that if this goes through, it'll come back to us through site plan, and we can look at it further. You know, I would say a couple of things. If we were enter into this agreement, that given the fact that there are going to be some lag times between the development of all the office buildings, that we would find a way to go ahead and screen all affected properties for the whole plan, the whole 4.7, to where that's in place from the start.
And I think that's very doable because the infrastructure is going to have to work together for the first building to the
So
fourth
it's
building.
gonna need to happen
It's
anyway.
going to happen, right. Yes, sir.
And then, of course, the other observation, you made the observation as well, and it is, for the most part, good planning practice in between commercial and residential. Office does have a good fit. And so on that particular score, I can see the merit. I am also kind of in between as well. But as has been noted, I would say that if somebody did come in with SR1, Mr. Green has mentioned 9 to 10 homes, possibly 12. If he did straight zoning, we would have no say over the materials. And then, of course, one of the people that spoke in the hearing mentioned about you just know who's going to come in there. And obviously, somebody could come in and seek to rezone that into multi-residential. So, you know, the question is, what do you do? So with that, I'd be interested in a motion from somebody if you're so inclined. Mr. Green, do you have something to say?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that in addition to the motion to amend the zoning, there would also need to be a motion to amend the land use plan.
A motion to amend the land use plan as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I also understand the concerns that some of the neighbors may have about this gazebo. Would it be appropriate to handle that now in this change or wait till the site plan is before us.
I honestly feel like that they could do it during site plan, and I think staff would be willing to work with the developer on that. But but to answer your question, site plan, we could do that. Two motions.
Two motions, one for the land use plan to amend it first, and then second motion for the rezoning.
Okay. All right, so we're going to need two motions tonight. The first one will be to amend the land use transportation plan, going from suburban living to suburban center. Am I right?
That's correct.
That's the motion that we need. Ms. Atchey makes the motion. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Millsaps. Any discussion? Once again, this is the motion to amend the land use transportation plan from suburban living to suburban center. We have a motion, a second.
I have a question,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Do we need to also outline specific findings in the motion?
For the rezone, we do.
Okay, so
Yeah.
do you want,
Not in this one. We'll amend this first, and then we can come back and do the rezone. And
Okay.
then we can do some findings of fact. Okay? All right, we have a motion and a second to amend the land use plan. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you for opposing that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Petrelli and Ms. McCormick are opposed. Motion carries. Then now the second one would be to rezone. Rezone the 4.7 acres from suburban residential low density to SR1, from SR1 to planned development OPD. And in this one, if you'd want to make a motion with the findings on there, that would be fine too.
well, I so move that the zone change amendment is in agreement with the land use plan for the area. Second, that there will be no adverse effect upon the adjoining property owners based upon the conditions that we have put on the developer for the zone change, unless such effect can be justified by the overwhelming public good or welfare. I also find that no property owner or small group of property owners will benefit materially from the change to the detriment of the general public. And finally, that the conditions affecting the area have changed to a sufficient extent to warrant an amendment to the area's land use plan and subsequently the zoning map. And I so move.
Would you like to add to your motion about the daycare?
Sure. And as agreed to by the developer, that this amendment or this agreement will not permit the use or the building of a daycare facility at this complex.
Okay, Ms. Beery, do you have that down pretty much? Okay, we have the maker of the motion. Do we have a second?
I have a second, but I'd like to include the screen the affected properties all across the back of the construction of the initial lot.
Okay, we have a second. Actually, it's amendment to the motion. Amendment to the motion, so Ms. Actually seconded, but she's got amendment to the motion. Do we have a second to the amendment?
Oh, second.
Ms. Stringfellow seconds the amendment. So now the question's on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? All she's saying is that the screening would be done and
With the construction of the first lot.
with construction of the first lot, right?
For the entire property.
For the entire property.
I accept the amendment.
Okay. All right, let's vote on the amendment. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're back to the main, Ms. Petrelli?
Yes.
Opposes that?
Yep.
And back to the main motion that's made by Mr. Robertson. Everybody got the motion? Okay, we're approving the rezone with the findings of fact, with the elimination of daycare centers, and of course, the amendment that's in effect as well. All right? Got a motion to second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ms. McCormick and Ms. Petrelli. All right, property is rezoned. We'll recommend rezoning to the Boardman Alderman. The third one that we need to deal with now is do we need a motion on the development plan too?
No, that was the rezoning.
Okay,
was that.
we're
was
good
that.
to go on that.
Good to go.
Okay,
Let me explain it.
Thank you.
all right, Mr. Freed.
Yeah, let me explain to everybody what the process is. So What this was is the preliminary development plan has been recommended for approval. And then what'll happen is that'll go to BOMA. And so next Tuesday night, I believe, at the BOMA General Committee, then that'll go to that General Committee, and then the General Committee will determine to move it forward to the full BOMA. And then 2 weeks after that, it'll go to the full BOMA, and there'll be a reading. There won't be a public hearing at that time, but there'll be a reading. And if that successfully goes through, then what happens is it goes, in about a month after that, then there'll be public notice, and there'll be a public hearing and another reading at another BOMA meeting. And that's when the final decision on the preliminary development plan will take place. Once that occurs, then in this whole process, and I know it sounds like a lot, but then what has to happen is the developer has to come back, once he has that, and get a final development plan. It's a little bit quicker process. It's not as lengthy as what this preliminary development plan process is. And so then they'll go through that process with the Planning Commission to go back to BOMA. If all that's approved, then the developer can start submitting site plans. And then those site plans, those wouldn't be public hearings or anything. They would just be things that would come to staff and then come to the Planning Commission for approval. So that's kind of the process of how this thing moves forward.
Thank you, Mr. Free. Okay, with that done, we're going to move on now to site plans, and the first site plan will be the Hendersonville Fire Station site plan. And who's handling this one?
That's Timothy Whitten.
Mr. Whitten.
So I don't really have any comments on this. This is a replacement of the old Fire Hall Number 2 on Freehill Road, which was demolished a while back due to structural problems. It's a 14,500 square foot facility. They're requesting approval.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we got a move by Ms. Atchley, second by Ms. McCormick. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So carried.
Just to clarify, that was
All staff comments, yeah. The next site plan is Indian Lake Self-Storage.
That is going to be Mr. Whitten as well.
Mr. Whitten. All right, you all have seen this before in the form of a FDP amendment to approve self-storage as an approved use on this lot. They've complied with all the conditions of that approval, including devoting a minimum of 11,424 square feet of the ground floor to commercial and retail tenants. And the Indian Lake Village ARC has approved this project, and they have agreed to all staff comments.
Okay. Move to approve by Ms. Stringfellow. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Atchley. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Move on now to the Learning Experience Site Plan. Who's handling this one?
This will be Mr. Whitten as well.
Mr. Whitten.
All right, this will be located on Saundersville Road near the Stop 30 in Saundersville Road intersection. It's a 10,000 square foot daycare facility. Staff has been working with the daycare quite a bit on the to bring their prototype building into compliance with both the Indian Lake Village's design standards and the city's building design standards. They have made a number of adjustments to do that, including adding some wall articulation, adding some windows, increasing the amount of brick and brick detailing, replacing some bright blue shed-type awnings over the playground with gabled coverings that integrate better with the overall building architecture. They are asking for a couple of waivers, which are detailed in your staff report. The first of those is a waiver to the city's building design standards, which require at least 70% of the front elevation to have storefront or windows. The proposed front elevation provides 60% glazing, while the elevation facing the secondary street provides 20%. Actually, Gary, I think that that's been updated now to the front elevation is actually 65%. The side street elevation is 38%. So that's a change there to the what's shown in number 1 in the staff report. I note there that the secondary street elevation, which is now 38%, that's a private street, not a through street. It may be appropriate to have a lesser percentage on that side street elevation. So that's the first waiver. The second waiver they're requesting is to the Indian Lake Village Building Design Standards, which state that windowsills should be located a maximum of 30 inches above the sidewalk. The tops of the windows should be located or be positioned at least 8 feet above the sidewalk. The purpose of this is to achieve a more elongated window pattern similar to what's under construction behind this site rather than a boxy style. The proposed building has windowsills, this should read, that are 36 inches above the sidewalk, not 2.5 feet, but they're proposing 36 inches above the sidewalk. And the tops, they're proposing to be 7 feet above the sidewalk. So what staff is asking them to do, if they don't get the waiver, they would need to, the sill would need to be lowered 6 inches. The top of the window would need to be raised 12 inches. That's if they don't get the waiver. So those are the two waivers they're requesting. This has been approved by the Indian Lake Village ARC, and they have agreed to all staff comments.
Mr. Whitten, were the approvals for the Indian Lake Village Architectural Review Committee, was that with the particular waivers you're mentioning, or were they no comment?
No, that's their approval was several iterations ago from what you see here. So they did not say anything about the windows.
Right. It says in here that they made no mention of it, which could be either thing. So, all right. Anybody from the developer here? Okay.
Yes.
You would just come up and since you're requesting a waiver, would like to give you a chance. If you would introduce yourself and go from there.
Thank you. My name is Gary Wendt. I'm with the Bradford Real Estate Companies, and with me tonight is Jim Harrison and Brad Snyder with Civil Site Design Group. Bradford is a development company with 25-plus years development. We deliver real estate that's been successful, and our team has completed or have under construction other learning experience facilities in the Chicagoland area. This would be the first in Tennessee. The Learning Experience Corporation has over 20 years of experience and 200 facilities in 15 states. So, as Timothy said, we've been working diligently with staff. We have agreed to all of the comments except for those two. And you can see the north elevation illustrated up on the screen, which faces the primary road and the amount of windows that we have in that at 65%. So it's a shortfall of 5%. And the window sill being slightly higher than the Indian Lakes Village requirements, and slightly the top of the window being a little less high. These are facilities for children, and recognizing that we don't want someone who may be choosing to do harm to the children within the facility, and so that the little higher windowsill is appropriate for this design, and I think the 7 foot is appropriate for the scale of the building that we're trying to achieve.
Are the windows tinted at all?
They are not. They are, well, slightly gray colored, but not reflective glass as I've seen in the building behind it.
Okay. I just would have a question about that. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I was going to open it up for questions of me or of our civil team.
Ms. McCormick.
Okay, so I guess this is a question more for Mr. Witten. I'm familiar with the fact that there are two other daycares in Indian Lake Village, the Academy and the Goddard School. Do they currently have what are their windows like? Are they essentially, do you know if they have waivers as well for them? Or are their windows based on our design standard?
I don't recall, my assumption is that they do meet the standards. I don't recall waivers for those.
Okay, he mentioned safety and his request being unique to the business. So that's kind of why I was asking, since there are two other daycares in Indian Lake Village. So that was my question. Thank you.
Okay. Any other, let's see, who's in the queue next? Ms. Petrelli, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you for coming tonight to speak with us.
Certainly.
Would you be open at all to removing the 1, 2, 3, 4 on those columns? How are those attached? Are they easily removable?
Those are the children's blocks, if you will.
I understand.
A, B, C, D, and
Sure.
1, 2, 3, 4. Typically, they are three-dimensional. They actually wrap round or white columns.
Is it just EFS
One of the staff early comments was to have them just applied to the face of the brick. So it's something that we can consider. It really is. We have yet another partner in this.
Sure.
The learning experience and their standards throughout the building. But
Sure. The
I'm
reason
open
why,
to it.
Sure.
me
The
just say
reason
that.
why I ask is, while it's really not that bad, but I mean, we have a plethora of buildings around town, abandoned, what I call architecturally logoed buildings. We had a donut shop that we couldn't move, that didn't turn over for a while, and so we're looking at this branded architecture. We've got a vacant burger box, Burger in the Box, whatever that is, Jack in the Box, sitting over there vacant. We've got a Pizza Hut from 30 years ago that's now something else. So I'm just not into logo architecture. I understand why you're doing this. I didn't know if there was a way to just minimalize this, because in the off chance that the building changes tenants, hands, owners at one point, this is going to be painted over and look silly in 30 years or 50 years.
They're actually an acrylic box that would be applied, and certainly they could be removed in the future.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my only concern.
Thank you, Ms. Petrelli. Ms. Silkwood.
Yes, thank you for being here tonight. Just kind of echoing what a couple of the other commissioners have said. You know, when you drive past this area of town, it's a very campus office complex-like atmosphere. And so taking a look at the architecture on this building, although it's beautiful, it really does sort of stand out. And I think one of the things that makes it stand out, and probably not in such a good way, are the sort of smaller windows. You know, when you're driving past and you see all of the office complex behind there, they have the much larger windows, and they're mirrored, and I think the reflective glass or the mirrored glass would be a good solution for you all in your specific case being a daycare, and I understand that. I'm a mother, I completely agree. You don't want strangers walking down the sidewalk peering in, but at the same time, we do want the building to blend in with its surroundings, because you do have such a campus-like area over there. So that would be my concern with the windows. And echoing what Commissioner Petrelli said about the logos, that's really the first thing that caught my eye. You know, something that's so site-specific and branding-specific would be hard to, I I mean, I assume it, like you said, it could be removed. It just doesn't, in my mind, flow with the architecture of existing currently on Saundersville Road. So, again, I would kind of echo what she said and hope that you would be willing to change that. And I know it's a logo thing, it's a branding thing, but at the same time, we're trying to create a certain look over there.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Silkwick. Go ahead.
Okay.
Mr. Free.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the things, as you're considering the waiver on this or anything in the future, one of the things that we're trying to do with our architectural design review and that we've been very effective with is we're trying to do something called placemaking. So basically what that means is whatever the use of the building is today, it could be something else 10, 15, 20 years from now. So we want architectural design where that it could be anything else in the future. Understanding that there are different tenants, and this tenant as well, that has certain things that work for them. But looking at the situation is just considering that. And in some cases, it could be, hey, the balance of it, everything looks pretty good. There's nothing that really sticks out to me. If that was the case, then, a waiver. But if there are obvious things that stick out, and what I'm hearing is the windows just are kind of sticking out a little bit as being different than it's in that area, then taking that into consideration on 10, 15, 20 years, just like what Peg was talking about with, buildings that are too identifiable, and now they're vacant and they're difficult to convert to something else. Just to keep that in mind with placemaking.
Thank you, Mr. Free. Mr. Lee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'm, very pleased to have another business coming to this area. Does the developer have any idea how many employees will be employed by this facility?
Daycare is very regulated by the state, and there would be over 25 teachers and employees in the facility.
Which is great. I've built a lot of educational buildings in my lifetime and worked on the design, and I don't think the reasons that were presented are overwhelming in terms of safety. There are plenty of ways to maintain safety, but then uphold our normal standards of building. And so I'm inclined to deny the waiver request in lieu of all of the things that have been said and just my own experience.
Okay. There have been some questions about the branding issue, specifically the acrylic blocks and the signage. What can be done on that from your standpoint to kind of address some of those concerns?
I know that the learning experience signage in the gable is a very important element to the corporation. And I have seen other facilities that have minimized, and we already minimized the blocks based on staff comments. But nonetheless, if those needed to be smaller or something that could readily be removed from the masonry piers, I think that the learning experience would understand that. I mean,
Okay.
we want to come into your community.
Sure.
We want to build this facility.
Okay.
So we would be open to,
You would be open to some amendments on that?
yes.
Ms. Atchley?
I don't have a problem with amendment number 1. I think it's very minor. Number 2, it seems like we collectively have a problem with, so I would recommend that we deny that waiver and go back to the 36 inches and the 8 foot. I don't have a problem with number 1. The signage is their footprint for their building, and if it is removable, to Ms. Petrelli, Ms. Silkwood's point, and it sounds like if they're acrylic
It can be. Yeah.
attachments, that can be, and of course, the sign on the top can be. So I'm fine with those being on there. So I would make the motion that we approve with waiver number 1, and not waiver number 2, returning the windows to the required size.
Okay, we have a motion to agree with all staff comments, approving waiver number 1, denying number 2, And we have a second. Do we have, I'm sorry, Mr. Robertson, do you have anything?
I just have a comment. I guess we're in the discussion now.
We're
We
in
have a
discussion,
motion
so
and a
we're
second. Yeah.
good to go. Yeah.
I'm going to vote against the motion because while I understand flexibility in the Indian Lake Village, especially on utilization, and I've already voted once to modify, to be flexible in that, the looks, I want to remain constant. I want to keep a certain look in that. And even though it's 5%, I don't want to set a precedent. Ms. Key said that the staff is unaware that there have been any waivers granted. And for the looks, I just don't want to grant any waivers. So with due respect, I'm going to vote against. I would like to see both of the waivers denied.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments? Questions? Mr. Whitten.
I just wanted to clarify on the window percentage. I am aware that there have been waivers granted on the percentage of window in terms of linear feet. My recollection is it's in, somewhere less than 10%, and I can't recall what projects those were specifically. My comment before pertained to the window sill height and the top of the window height. So, but as far as the percentage of glazing, there has been waivers on that before.
Yeah. And I guess where I would like to just make a couple of comments, I think that the maker of the motion, obviously, I think had a good motion. I think if we can get the windows back to where they need to be, and provided that the signage can be taken on, taken off, to answer Ms. Petrelli's question and Ms. Silkwood's question. It's a nice-looking building. I think it would look very good over there. So I'm inclined to vote for the motion. Any other? All right. All in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
We have no sketch plats, we have no preliminary plats, we've already handled rezoning requests. Staff reviewed projects that are approved: Bank of America, Fountain Brook, Indian Lake Village Phase 1, Village of Stony Brook Section 1 Phase 5, Village of Stony Brook Section 1 Phase 4, no requirements needed on that. Staff reviewed projects pending: Arby's exterior remodel, site plan Durham Phase 1, Section 1, Revision 1 of the final plat, Exxon Cooler Addition, site plan, Freehill Properties paving pad addition, and Indian Lake Village Phase 8, Section B resub, Lot 52, Kroger, U571 online shopping addition, and the Lakeside Park, Section 1 resub, Lots 26 and 28. Those are staff reviewed projects that are pending. Mr. Free on other?
Yes, we need to have a motion to cancel our July the 3rd meeting due to events in the community on July the 3rd. They're going to be going on, and to move that meeting to July the 17th.
Okay, so we would be canceling our July 3rd meeting because of Freedom Festival and the holiday, and moving that to July 17th, which would be, all intents and purposes, that would be the meeting that would be televised on Channel 3.
That's correct.
Moved by we have a motion and a second. Ms. Ashley, Ms. McCormick seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Yep, all opposed. Carries, so ordered. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Lee? Mr. Free?
Yeah, just under my comments, I just wanted to give a quick brief. We had a good meeting with the Stop 30 Future Land Use and Transportation Plan, and we're looking to start moving forward with that. And I just wanted to give a real brief update of where we're headed with that. We're in the process. We're going to be gathering data and looking at transportation scenarios, and then here shortly in the next few weeks, we'll get all the property owners and together of all the property that are within that area, and just talk with them about what they want to do with their property, explain to them what the process is we're fixing to undertake, and then we'll set a date to have a public visioning meeting with it'll be sort of like a charrette, and we'll work with the public and everybody that attends to come up with ideas of visioning for a new future land use plan for that area. And then it's going to be kind of interesting process to go through with that. Then once we gather that information, staff will then utilize that information as well as all of the data, and we'll try to put together 2 versions of a future land use plan. I mean, one could be confirming the plan we have is an adequate plan, but we'll see what we come up with on that. And then then when we have 2 plans to kind of look at and discuss, we'll have another public meeting with the public to discuss those 2 plan alternatives and get input. And then after that process, then I think we probably would have a planning commission work session where just the planning commission and the staff, public's welcome to attend, but it would just be the planning commission and the staff working out the details to kind of fine tune that to a final proposed plan. Then that would be available for the public to review. We would have an actual public hearing, planning commission would have a public hearing. At some point in time, we would send it to BOMA because BOMA has to approve the transportation plan, but the planning commission is the one who approves the land use plan. So we'll do something before it's all finalized to get BOMA's comments as well as to get them to adopt the transportation plan for the Stop 30 corridor. I'm looking at probably starting that process next month, hopefully maybe ending it in October. And then once we're done with that, and then we'll look to where the next part of the community, where there could be potential growth in the future, and look at addressing the land use plan within that area.
Let me just congratulate staff and Director Free for convening this meeting that we had on March 15th. I want to tell you, May 15th rather, I felt like it was a great success. We had residents, we had planning commissioners, we had aldermen there, of course, department heads, and, for a good hour and a half probably, we sat there and discussed the main issue that's in our city right now, which is traffic. And especially we're talking Stop 30 corridor. Not going to quote any numbers or anything tonight, but we actually looked at a stretch of road and looked at the financial impact of what that was on just a preliminary basis. And I would just say, I think that the more as a commission that we can come out in front of this issue and be part of the solution for this city, I think that it's part of our role. And I want to congratulate all of our commissioners for their help, and I'm looking forward to working even more on that. It was a good meeting.
May I make a comment regarding those? I want the board to know that there is an effort in the Drakes Creek Road community to work with the alderman to try to pave that road. It's a very dangerous situation. There's a lot of development going on out Drakes Creek Road. And while Stop 30 Road is important for us to look at in the future, I, for one, have been working hard to try to convince the alderman that something needs to be done at Drakes Creek Road immediately. There have been a community insurgents, I think, and they'll be at the June 12th meeting. Just the other day, I was out surveying the road and trying to measure the road. It's only about 18 feet wide, and a truck carrying rafters, engineered rafters, came by and almost hit me. So it's just a dangerous situation. So I just, as far as getting out in front of traffic issues, I just want this board to know that the community over there is working hard and lobbying hard to try to get that road fixed. Also, Mr. Chairman, sometime I would like for this board to take up a discussion on some of the items that Hendersonville Horizons recommended for the Planning Commission. The Board of Aldermen has approved or accepted the report. So at some time I would like maybe for Keith to give a overview of some of the recommendations that this group of citizens brought forward for specifically the Planning Commission to look at.
That's a very good suggestion. Maybe you can add it to our agenda under your planning director comments or other, maybe make an agenda item next month. We'll do that. Okay. Hearing no other comments, do I have a motion, Mr. Millsaps?
Mr. Chairman, I move we stand adjourned.
Got a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
We are adjourned.